Power 98.7. Welcome to it. It is just after 1 o'clock. And wow, we've had quite an exciting news hour there with lots of you calling in. Thank you very much for engaging with our Northwest Department of Education spokesperson, Pabi Moloi. And from the very beginning, many of us could smell a rat. But we won't go backwards, forward, ever. Backwards, never. And if you had sent a voice note, then maybe later we can have a little bit of an interaction with that. And of course, you can get on X to make sure that you give us your opinions. Mad, bad, funny, sad, whatever it is, let's talk about it. By the way, we're getting closer and closer to that exciting Supreme All-in-One Coatings competition where one of you will win 2,500 Rand worth of prizes courtesy of Supreme All-in-One Coatings. That's right, we're taking all things crispy, golden and delicious. It's all happening at 7 minutes after 2 o'clock, and I hope you've logged on to Power 98.7's website to register and proceed to get yourself the Supreme All-in-One Coatings competition entry. Stay tuned to take the quiz based on the Supreme All-in-One Coating to win the ultimate prize. Brought to you by Supreme All-in-One Coatings for consistent, delicious, deep-fried flavor. T's and C's apply.
Get in touch with Pabi on X at Pabi Moloi.
Well, from 1 o'clock we go inside, right? So that was the news, which was our outlook on what is happening to us, how it affects us, is where we start from 1 o'clock. And today we're speaking again to therapist, communicator, mental health communicator and researcher Nsamu Moonga about an issue that comes up very, very often in terms of abuse from elders in a lot of black families. Now, we're talking about all sorts of abuse. We're talking about psychological abuse, physical abuse. We're talking about gaslighting. We're talking about the auntie who belittles their children. We're talking about the grandmother who will, say whatever they need to say, and then will say, I was just joking with you. It's just grandma joking with you. These aren't quirks, they're patterns of abuse that are hiding in plain sight. And in many of our homes, this is kind of normalized because, well, that's just how he is. Well, that's just how Mkhono is. And so we're exploring now how to tell the difference between a strong personality and harmful behavior. And more importantly, why silence sometimes protects abusers more than victims, and what we can do now, because I can hear many of you are going, I'm just going to ruin my family if I say anything. And for a long time, I have felt the same in certain sectors of my family as well. So, Nsamu, you have a lot of work to do holding our hands through this conversation. Welcome back. It's nice to hear from you.
Oh, lovely. Get in touch with Pabi Moloi on X.
You're too funny. Too funny. All right, so let's start with it. I mean, so many of our families excuse toxic behavior or abusive behavior just because somebody is an elder or just because somebody is a family member. So we keep quiet. What's the emotional cost of that silence?
The emotional cost of the silence is immense. It cannot be quantified, but it definitely erodes at establishing a functional civil society. Because some of the people that we shield from accountability for well-known psychological reasons,
right,
they go on to cause havoc, as we can see in our society, and they cause serious harm to other people because they feel that they can get away with murder, literally, sometimes.
And it's so difficult because, yes, we speak of our black families, but, in many cultures, you need to respect your elders. So when that loud, disrespectful granny, for example, who says extremely damaging things, we're told to just respect her. So if we stand up and we say, I don't appreciate how you speak to me, or that hurts my feelings, we're told you're being disrespectful. So in a big way, you're almost I can imagine a big garbage dump, and everyone just dumps their junk into you, and you're expected to just take it. I mean, what does that make you when you go out into the world, Nsamu, and interact with others?
It turns a lot of people sour. It turns a lot of people into misfits, right? And we see, because it's important for us to get feedback, right, in our settings, and if the feedback is coming from the people that are closest to us, even better, and especially when we know that they have our interests at heart, we can take that, evaluate that feedback, and then respond accordingly. But in an event where there is no feedback, right, in some Bantu languages, they talk about a person who doesn't receive sufficient feedback for their behavior in a society will end up at the mother-in-law or the father-in-law with what we can't mention now on the back of their trousers, right? So feedback is really necessary. It's necessary for us, good or bad, and especially when there's an issue that we're not acting properly. So we're not acting in our own interest sometimes, and also we're not acting in the public interest, and that's really important for us to hold, because when we permit abusive behaviors, we're not just permitting it temporarily. We are also allowing that to eat ourselves alive.
Okay, so feedback from whom?
Hopefully we have sufficient strength within that particular family or particular society that can give us feedback, in terms of our behaviors, because that's when we know. That's when we know whether we are acting in our own interest and acting in the interest of the group. And I understand that some of the challenges are that some families, there's a lot of tension there that kind of makes the family extremely fragile, and then people become reluctant to give that feedback, because everyone else maybe there's violence, maybe there's substance use, maybe there are all these other things that are underlying the structure of the family, where feedback then is not accepted, or it's not invited, or there's threat to the feedback.
And that's very, very difficult, because one does then hope that, or assume that, with maturity comes maturity, right? With age comes an ability to kind of even self feedback and allow ourselves to be better role models within our families. There's a lot of avoidance of accountability sometimes in our families. And I don't know why I feel so strongly about this. I want it to be noted that it's not just in black families. It's in a lot of families. I don't think we must tarnish ourselves with this brush that we are so bad. Many families have this going on, right? So we'll say, that's just how he is, or leave her, they're old, to avoid accountabilities. But that's also just protecting the abuser, isn't it?
Yes, it's and that's important for us to also mention that it's not just in black families, right? It's in all families. There's a phenomenon. There's a phenomenon called invisible loyalties. Invisible loyalties are exactly that. They are loyalties that we have to our ties, whether it's familial ties or cultural ties or historical ties. But they're extremely invisible. A part of that is that we identify ourselves. We've got these identities that are attached to our families. They are attached to histories. They are attached to whatever it is that our identities are attached to, right? And then when that identity is threatened, we definitely suffer from serious cognitive tensions and cognitive dissonance. And because we are identified with that particular family or relationship, questioning the values of that family or the behaviors of that family that we have over-identified ourselves with and we have romanticized, it threatens our very existence. And so we compromise. We start explaining certain things away as a way of easing that tension within ourselves. And so that's why sometimes, even within families, people are going to explain things away, even what is blatantly abusive and sometimes even bordering on criminal behavior. Well, somebody is going to allow a child to escape accountability from the state, for example, right? When it is very clear that this person is acting in a certain way. So a part of that is trying to manage this tension that builds up when it is pushing against our invisible loyalties and our very much identities that are attached to these relationships.
0861 987 000. That's the number that you can dial to engage with our guest, therapist, researcher, and mental health communicator Nsamu Moonga, who is on the line with us. We are talking about excusing abuse in our families, just saying that's how they are, or they're old, or it doesn't matter this time, or you've got to have respect because they're your elder. And you can add all of your own examples there as well. Boniswa has called in. Hi, B.
Hi, Pabi, and hi to your guest. You know this issue of abantu abadala abakwatile abakwatela phezu kwethu. Singabayenzanga next, and I know I might just have a family meeting after my comment, because I have relatives similar, but I think my perspective was they just need therapy. When I was a kid, I didn't understand a lot of their behavior, so I would internalize it, absorb it, and be mad at them. Now I just pray for them. They really need therapy. They need deliverance. I'm the one person in the family who proactively took the initiative to correct that behavior. So I had a family meeting. Like they're just mad.
Okay.
So it's a long story, but I was calling
and at you or at somebody else? They were just mad?
No, they were mad at me because I was calling out the adult in the family.
Got it.
And essentially in my conversation, I even said, I'm speaking in this tone and manner because that's how you speak to people. And she got mad. And then I asked, if you get mad when you speak to people like that, how would you expect other people to receive it if you can identify that it's not okay for you? And the fact that you were born 20 years, 30 years before us doesn't give you the right to speak to us, however, to dehumanize us. If anything, because you are the leader, I expect you to lead me better. And that was like the conversation. And they were like, I was like, be rude. And you can't say rude. I was like, the behavior. Whatever the behavior is and the correct word to describe it, it's exactly that. So I was expected to marinate how I complained. I wasn't even complaining. I was just highlighting the things that she does.
So what happened in the end? Were you kicked out of the house, never to be seen again? Or Boniswa, did somebody there get onto your side? Because, I mean, sometimes if this is your mom, then at least your aunt, if she says something, it gives more gravitas to what you're saying. Or what happened in the end?
Oh, no. In the end, my granddad understood because I had to explain to him in detail. They tried to kick me out, but I said, I ain't going nowhere.
Boniswa. Well, thank you very much for bringing that in because, I think it's extremely brave to call a whole family meeting to call somebody out, right, Nsamu? And B, it gives you a big, I don't know. For me, it would just give me a full stop to either my relationship or my desire for that person to change. Because even here, amongst all of us, you want to stick to your guns. Cool. That's who you are. I will never try to change you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and exactly what we were talking about earlier around, if there's sufficient safety and the relationship in the family is healthy enough. Healthy enough being the key operational word there, is that something like what Moniso did is possible, even though it is still threatening the structure of that particular family, and there's still uncomfortable feelings that come out of it. But that whole exercise of calling out people, inviting them to reflect on themselves and reflect on their impact on the whole, it's a brave act. It should not really be a brave act, but it is because of the nature of these relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. You know, at the end of it, there is somebody who pays the emotional bill, and we've talked a little bit about this in the very start of it. Who takes that on and then has to make many appointments with you, Nsamu, to be able to unpack it and figure it out and see where it first came from, and that's very, very difficult. Let's talk about the drunk uncles, okay? Which is just a term for the drunks. And every family will have somebody who just takes it a little bit too far, and then either they get aggressive or they start using vulgar language, and the family has to go into a kind of protective denial, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Why do we normalize this kind of chaos, man?
Yeah, because it's funny because it's a thing called social equilibrium, right?
Yeah.
So we've all defined ourselves by whatever these relationships might be. Even within that particular structure, the equilibrium is such that there are people who have identified themselves as the non-drinking uncle. So there's a drunk uncle who takes all the attention, but then there are other people who are also identifying themselves in almost in opposition or in juxtaposed situation with the drunk uncle.
Okay. Which gives them a sense of status as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the drunk uncle, and then there's the non-drinking uncle. There's the wealthy uncle. There's the sober uncle, and then there's the right. So the within the structure of the family, there's not just the drunk uncle, right? And the drunk uncle doesn't just become. So the drunk uncle is what in systems experiences that we refer to as the designated patient, right? Is the one that everyone knows and sees because of the nature of it. But within the ecosystem of that particular family, there are other relationships that people are working out of. Now, here's an example. Suddenly the drunk uncle ceases to be the drunk uncle. It confuses the whole family system, the constellation, because now I was the sober uncle. Who do I become, right? I was the sober uncle because of the drunk uncle. So it threatens my own identity and my placing in that particular family unit already. So, and this is why sometimes certain abusive behaviors and for example addictions and addictive behaviors, they cannot be fixed by fixing the individual.
Yes.
We have to ask the question about what systems, what structures within this particular family are bringing about this particular behavior.
We've got to leave it there because of time, but what you've brought up is so fascinating, because what we actually should be doing, which doesn't excuse any sort of abusive behavior, but, you know, as an exercise, understanding how the drunk uncle became the drunk uncle. What actually were the circumstances of his upbringing? You know, who was there before him? Was he a kind of forgotten child or whatever it is, you know? Does this mean that possibly addiction then runs in our family? Okay, but if I look at my other uncle, he's not addicted to anything outward like alcohol or drugs, but we never see him. He's always at work. So does this, you know, it's so fascinating. As soon as you get emotionally out of the system, to be able to look at it objectively and see it for what it is. But it's hard to, because emotionally you're right in there.
Yes, you're hooked. You're rightly inside. You're upagati.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. We will leave it there. Perhaps this is something to have a part 2 about, but Nsamu, tell us how we can find you and the work that you do.
So you can find me on WhatsApp, on telephone 0963-446-1193, or find me on LinkedIn or other socials. I'm usually searchable, and my name is Nsamu Moonga will take you somewhere with my platforms.
Perfect. It's always great to talk to you. Thank you once again.
Always a delight, Pabi.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day further.
You too. And Nsamu Moonga, they are therapist, researcher, and mental health communicator, talking to us really about the state of our families and how we kind of excuse certain things as people's personalities when they actually are abusive.